Hey party people, what's going on? This is B. Dillinger. How are you? Welcome to today's tutorial. So in today's video, what we're going to be discussing are the basics of working with leather. Now if you've never worked with leather before, this is going to be a great video for you. And if you've worked with leather a little bit but want to pick up some tips and some tricks, this is also going to be a great video. You're going to do two videos. So this particular video, I'm just going to take you through the cutting process and some of the things that I do, because I'm actually working on not the same tote, but I'm working on a second version of the Stella McCartney tote, and this definitely has some things that I want to point out and call out. So I just want to be able to share those things with you because I think it's going to be helpful. So I just want to go over, like I said, some basics of working with leather. So again, and I have so many things to tell you guys and share with you guys. I actually made a bunch of notes, so don't mind me if you see me referring to my notes. So the first thing that I need to tell you guys, if you are a home sewer, then you've probably worked with fabric. But if you're buying leather for the first time, you actually buy by the square foot, and that's a major point of difference. So, you can go to a fabric store, any fabric store, and just, buy something by the yard. With leather, you buy by the square feet. And so, what I would say is any project that I'm going to put up, I will tell you how much square feet you will need for the project. So don't worry, I've got you completely covered. However, if you're taking on different projects or you're taking on projects of your own, there is a way that you can figure out the square footage, and I will post that information at the end of this video so that you guys have it, and maybe that'll help you with the calculations of it. So in terms of working with leather, a few things that I think are important to know is that, you're dealing with square feet. And because you're dealing with square feet, you have to kind of train your mind a little bit differently how to look at your pattern pieces in terms of what you need. So what I would first say is that if you're buying something, it's always better to buy a little bit more than not enough. Also, if you are matching a stripe or a pattern or anything like that, kind of like with home sewing, you're going to need some additional square footage. So that being said, I can't say exactly how much extra square footage you will need because it really kind of depends on what the repeat is. But I would generally say easy, probably an extra 2 to 4 square feet will probably be enough. But again, if it's a huge repeat, there's a good chance that you might need more. The other thing that I would mention is that not all leather skins are the same. So you might get two, one that's 5 feet and another one that's 5 feet, one of each, and they may not have the exact same shape, and it's just due to the nature of the skins. That's just kind of how they are. And then also I just want to mention sometimes, like when you get skins, they might have holes, they might have abrasions, they might have scuff. It just means that it has some imperfections that you need to work around. Now, of course, if you buy a huge skin and it has a hole right in the middle, and you have a big piece that you need to cut, it's just going to make your life more difficult in order to work around it. It can be done, and you may have to do it very strategically. So I would always, just suggest to you guys, try to get skins that have the least amount of imperfections. Although sometimes if you find a skin that, has an imperfection or something, wrong with it, you can say an irregularity, you can work around it so it's not the end of the world. Let me just look at my notes. The other thing that I would mention in terms of skins, just so you know, is that skins are generally sold by the lot or the bundle. And basically what that means is that all the skins that were developed at that particular time, all were treated the same. So they got the same amount of tumbling, they got the same amount of color, the same amount of treatment, the same amount of everything. And those skins in that bundle are going to be more consistent. And a bundle generally speaking, consists of 12 to 24 skins. Now the reason that I mention this, because it's kind of advanced leather working, is that if you buy a leather skin and then have to go back and get another one, there could be a slight shade difference because you're buying 2 skins from separate bundles. So it's not the end of the world. Usually, we say that it's, there could be a slight shade difference, and you can work around it. So again, it's one of the reasons why I say, if at all possible and you think you're going to need more, buy more up front so that they all come, from the same bundle. I would say that. And then the other thing that I would mention to you guys about how leather is different than fabric is that leather doesn't fray. So you know, like when you're sewing with fabric and you cut the edge and it starts to get, you know, kind of like rough, you know, and the little strings come out, fibers come out. Leather is not going to do that. You make a clean cut and that's pretty much it, which is why you can cut smaller seam allowances and not worry about it unraveling. And so again, you know, if you're doing projects, oftentimes your seam allowance can be anywhere from 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. And so just keeping that in mind, it's another reason when you get to the cutting stage of it that you want to be completely accurate. So just want to mention that. And then lastly, before we go on to the demo that I'm going to do for you guys, is that if you're buying leather to sew at home and you think you might need to use your home sewing machines in general are meant to sew fabric and not leather. A suede or a calfskin or a lambskin will give you, you know, a thinner type of leather that you might be able to sew at home. But by all means, if you do decide to buy leather and you do want to sew it at home, as soon as you get it, make sure you cut a piece and try sewing it on your home machine. Because if your machine can't handle it, it's probably better that you find out up front, as opposed to getting all the way through your project and then you realize that your home machine is going to conk out on you and is not going to be able to do it. One of the ways you can help your home machine to be able to sew with leather is to buy a needle that's appropriate for sewing leather for your particular make or model. So I do want to mention that there are needles that are specifically meant to be used on home sewing machines, and those will also help. Are there workarounds? Yes. Are there ways to use a heavier leather for home? Yes. And I will be sure to put up a workaround video for you guys so that there's some, you know, tactics and strategies and tips that you guys can take on if you do want a heavier leather, but you know, you just don't have the ability to sew it at home. So I definitely want to mention that. So make sure you stay tuned for that video. And I think that, let me just look at my notes. Oh, keeping the seams flat. You know, if you've been home sewing and you are a home sewer, and this is just generally what I do, is that every time I've sewn a seam, I will go to the iron and I'll iron it flat. Now with leather, you can iron it, and I'm going to put that in the next video and also with some additional tips. But to keep your seams really flat when you're using leather, you actually glue them down. And there's also another video that I will post just discussing glues, because I think glue, there's so much to know about glue that it really warrants a separate video. So I would mention that. But for the sake of this video, what I would just mention to you guys is that if you want your seams flat, you just glue them. And then you basically hammer them flat. Now, another thing, I just feel like I have so much to tell you guys, is that when you're trying to hammer them flat, hammer your seams flat, you're not going to use a standard everyday hammer. There are special hammers designed specifically for hammering leather, because if you use a standard hammer, you know, the ones with the metal heads, as soon as you strike the leather, you're probably going to leave a dent in it, and we don't want that. We want it to stay smooth. Hey party people, what's going on? This is B. Dellinger. How are you? So remember a little earlier, or just basically for you guys a couple seconds ago, I was talking about your seams and how to get them to lay as flat as possible. Well, I went and made a couple of like little mock-ups for you guys so that you can see, and I can just kind of demonstrate to you the difference. So if you see this particular one, this one again, you know, it's just, you know, sewn, but it doesn't lay very flat. But this one, however, is much different. So if you notice, like the comparison between the two, I mean, they're pretty different. And really the major point of difference is that I hammered it flat with the correct hammer, and then I also glued the seams down. So I just want to show, you know, you guys, you know, this is just like a little kind of like an extra detail. You know, you don't have to do it. You know, like if you had a bag and it was like this, you know, and you wanted that type of look, it's perfectly fine. However, me, just kind of being how I am, extremely anal and just want everything to look, you know, as perfect as possible, I thought gluing down the seam was a better and more finished look. So I just want to show that to you guys. The other thing I want to show you real quickly, that this is probably the kind of hammer that, you know, most of you guys have at home. Please do not use this kind of hammer on leather. I just, you know, can you use it? Yes. Do I recommend it? No. Please don't do that. And if you're like, why? Well, you know, basically, you know, once you strike it, if you guys can see, it just made a huge mark. And like, why would you do that? So like, I wouldn't do that. So now if you use a rawhide mallet, or hammer, as I like to say it, it has this, you know, rawhide tip. So, you know, if you go to strike it, you don't have that. So here, let me strike the other side, you know, because maybe you guys would like to watch me bang. Okay? See? You're not going to get that. So that's, again, one of the reasons why we use one of these types of hammers. And again, it just, you know, it's just, you know, proper tool etiquette. Now, are these cheap? No, they're not. But, you know, if you're doing these kinds of projects, you know, you want to have the right tools and the appropriate tools. Now, if you want to work around, put that to the side. Say you've got this and you're like, well, listen, you know, I just really want to use this. Well, basically all you do is you take a piece of cotton or cotton batting or, you know, whatever, wrap it around, take, you know, a piece of other material like a cotton, just wrap it, and then just use a piece of string and just cover it, you know, and that will, you know, it's a little makeshift, and that will get you through. But please, just buy the right tools. That's all I have to say about that. But, you know, that's my workaround. This is why we don't use this. That's why we use this. This is what happens when you use this. You know, it's, you know, it's just all these projects. So, oh, one more thing. I always just have one more thing to do. So leather, just to mention, doesn't have a grain or a nap per se. Sometimes you will encounter leathers where, you know, you need to be able to you know, have all the pieces go in the same direction, usually like with a stripe, or maybe sometimes, maybe if it's a hair calf and you want to keep everything the same. This particular piece of leather actually had a grain or a nap, which basically means there's a direction to it. So when you rub your hand down it this way, it's very smooth, but when you do this, it's actually kind of rough. I think you guys can hear that. It's like this. It's like scratchy. It's like, you know, it's like rough. And that's not the way that I wanted it on the front and the back. Because if I had cut one whole piece and it was smooth on one side, and then as it wraps around and comes up on the other side, it would have been the opposite grain direction on the back. And I didn't want that. So again, you know, and it was just kind of a function of how I did the pattern. The pattern has a seam at the center bottom, so that when I laid it out, I was able to lay out both front and backs with the direction in the way that I wanted it. I want you guys to see this. So you see how the pattern starts in the front, and then as you go to the bottom, it's still consistent, and then as it wraps around to the back, it's still consistent here. So just notice that this is a place where I actually, again on purpose, lined up the pattern so that it was consistent all the way around, and it's basically seamless. So again, you know, there will be those instances, you know, if you're working with like a snake or an embossed, you know, type of texture or something like that, where you're going to have to do a little engineering. You will need a little bit more leather in order to achieve that, but it's totally workable and you can totally do it. But generally speaking, leather doesn't have a direction or a grain. So you can place your pattern pieces however you want to place them, and try to conserve the amount of leather that you're going to be using for your project, and that's no problem. I'm going to show you the piece of leather that I'm working with and some things that, you know, I'm going to call out and show you so that you can see what I'm dealing with, and how I'm going to work around that. So again, you know, just to give you some confidence in your ability to work with it. So, you know, again, don't worry, it's totally doable. However, for this particular project, if you're watching this video for the Stella McCartney bag, you can purchase whatever you want because we don't have a heavy sewing component because most of the stitching is going to be done by hand because you know we're doing that whip stitch. So the exception to the rule, because there's always exceptions to the rule, is, you know, for that reason, you know, you are going to be able to choose something a little bit heavier, you know, so by all means, like I said, please do choose whatever you want. The only thing I would say to that, however, is try to choose something that has like a soft hand to it, you know, not super stiff, because the bag kind of has like this roundish curve at the side. And I think it's just gonna give you a nicer look if you pick something that isn't too stiff. So I want to mention that. So other than that, let me just see. I think we can go on with the rest of the video because I'm going to do the demo for you guys next. So just stay tuned and hold tight. I'm now going to give you guys the demo. Hey everybody, so basically what I want to go over with you real quickly is what I do when I first get a skin. So the first thing that I do before I even start working on it is I take my skin and I lay it completely out. And so the space that I have to work with in relationship to how much space I have for the camera to show you is not really that much, so I'm going to try to consolidate it and get it into one spot. But the first thing that I do is I take some masking tape like this, and then I just break off, you know, like a couple of pieces. And I keep, you know, just like a little kind of like a tick mark amount. And what I'll do is I'll just, you know, keep them on my finger, kind of like that, so that as I see imperfections, scratches, scuff marks, holes, or anything on the skin, that I can identify it immediately so that when I go to cut, I don't miss it when I'm in the cutting place. So I already took the liberty of going through the skin and taking a look at what I thought were some of the imperfections. And so it's going to be kind of slightly hard to see because I did pick a light colored skin. But I think if I hold things up, that you'll be able to see, you know, show you everything. But I just want to show you that right here, you know, if you look at the skin really closely where it has like this kind of print, you know, the print looks like it didn't catch all the way in the emboss process. So I definitely made a mark there. And then as I got to this part of the skin, like in this little spot, if you guys can see that, it's a little bit gray. So I put a mark, I put a little piece of tape for that. And then as I go through the skin, it's really kind of, this one is really more toward the edge. So if you can see that, we've got like some excuse me, it's a different finger. We've got some brown marks, some kind of blackish marks where it looked like it might have skid or got, you know, rubbed up against something. So I'm definitely calling those out. And then, you know, on and on. And so the rest of the skin actually, you know, as I'm going through it, it's actually in pretty good condition, and so there isn't anything else to call out. So that's pretty much it. The other thing that I wanted to show you guys is that the square footage, if I can turn this around for you guys, the square footage is always printed on the back side of the skin. So you never have to worry about what's the front or the back. Anything that's been stamped will tell you that that's the back side of the skin. But just if you want to know the square footage, it's usually stamped on the back. Okay, so here's what I want to show you guys next. So this particular skin, it actually has a stingray embossed pattern on it. So if you know, so when I lift it up, if you guys can see this, you can see that the stingray pattern appears, let's see if I do my hand like this, right here and right here. And so generally speaking, stingray is something that you want that pattern, and I'll do another picture of it close up. So if you look at this particular skin, you can see that it has this repeat. So you see where you kind of have that diamond shape, and then there's really nothing in the middle. And you usually want to have that in the very center of your pattern, but because, you know, it's so irregular and what we're cutting is, you know, is fairly big. So, you know, this is our pattern piece. it's not going to make sense to put it just on the center here. So we're just going to engineer it a little bit differently so that the stingray pattern falls on each side of our pattern. And that's just the way that I'm going to do it. And then, you know, our little side piece, we will engineer that also in the middle where it's, you know, the least amount. It's least conspicuous. I think that's what I mean to say. So that's how we're going to do that. So in terms of conservation, with this particular pattern, we're not going to be able to do that much conservation because we are trying to hit this pattern. So we're going to actually have more waste, which again, you know, I'm totally willing to accept because the outcome of the bag is more important to me than the conservation. So how I'm going to lay it out so that you guys can see, I'm going to lay it out so that this, you know, the kind of part that doesn't have any pattern to it goes in the center of the bag, like that, right? And then I'm going to put my side pieces, you know, somewhere in here again where it makes sense. And so again, you know, if I'm looking at how this pattern runs, you know, the kind of the more whitish part, like the bigger speckles, actually kind of show up on the edge of the bag. So I think for me it makes sense to put the side pieces probably in a place that's, you know, like I said, less conspicuous. So I'm just going to... So the next thing that I want to share with you guys really quickly is basically what I'm going to be using for the interior. So remember when I said, you know, you have the option on your inside facings to use whatever you want. So for me, what I'm going to be using is a contrast leather, this, and then for the lining, here are my lining pieces, I'm going to be using this. So if you can just imagine what this and this is going to look like together, I think this is going to make a nice combination for the interior of the bag. Remember, the top part is going to be the facing and the bottom part is fabric, which I kind of picked this kind of, you know, leopardy kind of print. I think that together is going to look really nice. If you learned something and you got some good information, by all means, please give this video a thumbs up. If you want to see the projects that I'm going to be working on and you want to stay up with me, definitely subscribe to my channel because I've got some real interesting projects and really cool stuff coming up and you don't want to miss a minute. What else should I tell you guys? I think that's pretty much it. I wish you bag success and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.